is 9 o'clock on a beautiful Friday morning, following the conclusion of Pesach, our wonderful holiday. Hope everyone is enjoying their chametz, their pizza, their cereals, their pasta, everything else that we've missed during this past week. We're going to go ahead and give everyone a couple of minutes to join, just to make sure that we are all set for our YouTube streaming. So this class today is called The Musical Beauty of Kabbalat Shabbat. And what I want to do is take you on a journey through our Kabbalat Shabbat service, kind of the history of where it came from, and then offer some beautiful musical examples to uplift our spirits as we enter into, believe it or not, Shabbat this evening. We know we've had a full week of services for Pesach. We had our first two Chag services last week, of course, after our Seder. And then we have Chol HaMoed services every morning as well. And then Pesach concluded yesterday evening, following the conclusion of the 8th day, which we had our Yizkor prayers as well. So we've got a couple of people tuned in right now. We'll give it about 1 or 2 more minutes. Get yourselves comfortable. And we're going to be enjoying some beautiful music of Kabbalat Shabbat. So I want to draw your attention to the Kabbalat Shabbat service. And to do that, I'm going to share with you the Siddur that we used for Kabbalat Shabbat services here at Sinai Temple. About 4 years ago, we were fortunate to have a wonderful donor donate the funds necessary to purchase, God, it must have been 2,500 copies of our new Siddur Lev Shalom. We're fortunate that we have many, many services throughout our building, and we have hundreds and hundreds of people coming in and out. 500 people in our school, 500 people in our religious school. So we have a real big need for Siddurim. And what I really loved about the Siddur Lev Shalom was a few different things. First of all, it's in color, so it's easy to follow along. But if you notice the different pages, you have the traditional Hebrew on the right-hand side. So if you're opening up the Siddur, you'll have basically the right half of this page on the right side of your Siddur, and then the left half of this page is going to be on your left side of the Siddur. So when you open up like a book, you're going to see both of these pages in front of you. And what's really beautiful about this is that it offers you the traditional Hebrew text on the right side, the translation of the text on the left side, and then any of the text in red is going to be our transliteration with the English alphabet. So this is going to be the transliteration of the Hebrew so that those who are not as familiar with the Hebrew text are able to follow along. And then what's really beautiful about the Siddur is that on the margins, we have interpretations or translations or additional prayers that will really help lift up our spirits if we need some extra text beyond the traditional liturgy. So let's say you're in the middle of the service, the Chazan is davening, and you have a little bit of time, maybe in the middle of prayer, your eyes wander to the margins to be able to have some extra inspiration. So let's talk about the actual Kabbalat Shabbat service. So the Talmud teaches in Shabbat 119a that as the Sabbath drew near, the sages would don their finest clothing and say to one another, "Let us go out to greet the Sabbath Queen." Words that are familiar to us now in the Lacan Dodi prayer, but that didn't come until a bit later. 1,000 years later, the Kabbalists of Sfat embellished the custom by actually walking out into the fields to welcome the incoming Sabbath. It was there in Sfat that the Kabbalat Shabbat service, literally welcoming the Shabbat service, was first formulated, and where it spread to the entire Jewish world. Jews saw the Sabbath as a queen, and it became their privilege to usher it in. They would wear white clothes, they would go out into the fields and sing beautiful songs to help usher in the spirit of Shabbat. The formal Friday night service actually begins with the recitation of Psalms 92 and 93. So yes, we find them here as part of our Kabbalat Shabbat service, but we now have the inclusion of extra psalms and extra songs to really help uplift the mood. So because Kabbalat Shabbat was an innovation, many congregations wanted to signify that Kabbalat Shabbat wasn't part of the established service. And they did so by having the Chazan stand at the bima until after Lacan Dodi, whereupon he moved to the accustomed place where he would lead services at the front of the synagogue. So there was that distinction between not having your official service leader lead Kabbalat Shabbat, so that he, back then it was only he, but now of course he or she would go to the place where they led the services, and then would actually begin the formal davening, the formal chanting of the service at Psalm 92 for the formal preparation of Kabbalat Shabbat. Now, the same is actually true with our morning services. A little tangent over here, that on our weekday morning services, it's traditional for the Chazan, the prayer leader, to start leading the service at the prayer Yishtabach. And Yishtabach is the prayer that comes right before the Baruch Hu, or Chatzi Kaddish and the Baruch Hu. So Baruch Hu is the formal call to worship, and it's the formal beginning of our Shacharit service. But when we say in the morning that Shacharit begins, on weekday mornings we say it begins with the Yishtabach, and that's normally where the Chazan will take over, and the Baal Tefillah, the person, maybe a lay leader or someone else in the congregation who is familiar with the liturgy, will lead all the prayers leading up to Yishtabach, and then the Chazan will take over at Yishtabach on weekdays. Now on Shabbat mornings, the Chazan will start leading formally at Shochein Ad, which is added liturgy for Shabbat mornings and also for festivals and high holidays. But that comes before the Yishtabach prayer, and that marks that's the delineation between the beginning part of the service, the Birchot HaShachar, Pesukei Zimra, and then the Chazan starts with Shacharit, even though it's still part of Pesukei Zimra, at the words Shochein Ad. On festivals, as I did on seventh-day Passover, and as we do on all Yom Tov mornings, the Chazan will start with Ha'el B'Ta'atzumot Uzecha, that's one line before Shochein Ad. And then on high holidays, the Chazan will start at HaMelech HaYoshev, the king who sits on his throne. So different delineations between where the Chazan will formally start chanting the service, but when Kabbalat Shabbat was introduced, the Chazan would not actually chant the service because it wasn't considered to be part of the formal liturgy. So the Kabbalat Shabbat service, in the form that we see it now, and I'll show you exactly where it begins here, contains psalms and one special song. And it's beautiful because not only do we get a certain number of psalms, we actually get one psalm for each day of the week. We start with Psalm 95. That's right over here. Okay, on page 11. And I'll talk about what's on the other pages too. On page 11, we have Psalm 95. So that's our psalm for Sunday. Psalm 95. Psalm 96. That's the end of 95. Here's Psalm 96, which is our psalm for Monday. Psalm 97, our psalm for Tuesday. And if you notice, the Siddur is also beautiful because it gives us a Hebrew letter at the beginning of each psalm, signifying which psalm that is in the course of our 6 psalms before Shabbat. So it's Aleph Bet Gimel, Psalm 97. Okay, and then we have Psalm 98, our psalm for Wednesday. Okay, starts over here, ends right over here. Psalm 99, our psalm for Thursday, ending right over here. And then, no, we do not have Psalm 100. Instead, we have our psalm for Friday, the very special psalm, Psalm 29, our psalm for Shabbat, which has many different recitations of the name of God. I believe it's 13. I haven't counted in a while too, but it says Kol Adonai, I believe, 7 times. So 7 is, of course, a very important number in Judaism. As Rabbi Rotenberg mentioned on the second day Chag, a really beautiful thing that we have the number 7 occurs so many different times. Obviously, 7 days of the week. That's not just what our normal work day or work week has always been. It's actually a creation of Judaism that we are commanded to rest on the 7th day, to create a distinction between the rest of the days of the working week and the 7th day. And then we have the 7 weeks, which counts the time that we are in now between Pesach and Shavuot, between Passover and Pentecost, literally the 50th day where we received Torah on Mount Sinai. And then we have the 7 months that are counted between the start of the Jewish New Year in the Torah, which is the month of Nisan. And now, obviously, the start of the Jewish New Year is Rosh Hashanah with Tishrei, but in the Torah, the first month was Nisan. And then we count 7 months to Tishrei. So a 7-month period between the holiday of Passover and the holidays of the fall, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, and Simchat Torah. And then we have the 7 years of the Shemitah year, that every 7 years we should let the land rest. And then, of course, 7 years times 7 is 49. And on the 50th year is the Jubilee year where all property was supposed to revert back to its original owner. So this number 7 is very, very important. And there's a lot of mystical implications as well in this psalm. So this was the psalm that was chosen for Friday. Psalm Vav, the 6th psalm of our 6 psalms for Kabbalat Shabbat. And then, of course, after our psalm for Shabbat, or psalm for Friday, sorry, our 6th psalm, we have a meditation on Abakoach, which is not traditionally done in our services, but it's a really beautiful prayer. I invite you to take a look at it in our Siddur. And then we have Lacan Dodi. So Lacan Dodi is a wonderful song that was composed in the 16th century. It was composed by the Kabbalist Rabbi Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz, a leading figure in the Sfat group of scholars. And what's really cool about Lacan Dodi and Mr. Rabbi Shlomo Halevi is that he wanted to make sure that we would not forget who composed the Lacan Dodi prayer. And how did he do this? Well, he inserted his name into the prayer. Take a look. The first letter of each verse, Shin, Lamed, Mem, that's Shlomo, and here's his Hey, right? Shin, Lamed, Mem, Hey, Shlomo, and then what is it? Hey, Lamed, Vav, Yud, Shlomo Halevi. There he is, right there, forever ingrained in our Lacan Dodi prayer so that we do not forget the wonderful author, okay? And if you look over here, there is reference to Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz. He died in 1576. So a wonderful insertion in the margins, talking about the history of the prayer, so that we can kind of have a more, a deeper understanding of our liturgy. Okay, so here's Lacan Dodi. Lacan Dodi has 9 verses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. On the 9th verse, we all rise and turn towards the entrance of the synagogue to literally greet the Sabbath bride. Bo'i chala, bo'i chala. Come, my bride, come, my bride. We greet you as we come into the synagogue. Okay? Now, in our Kabbalat Shabbat service, there's a wonderful distinction. As I said over here, the Kabbalat Shabbat service, the first 6 psalms, Psalms 95 through 99 and Psalm 29, plus Lacan Dodi, made up this extra beautiful way of welcoming in the Kabbalat Shabbat service. Then we have this distinction. This right over here, this is a break in the service where we have Nichum Avelim, comforting of the mourners. Now, what's beautiful about this is if you think about this, if you had just, God forbid, lost someone in your family, would you want to be in the synagogue listening to all of these joyous songs and having people dancing and clapping and singing and being so joyful? Is that the kind of energy that you would want to feel? Yes, we are commanded to welcome the Shabbat with joy and to be happy and not to have any public mourning on Shabbat, but is that the kind of energy that you would want to be experiencing as a mourner? Probably not. So the tradition was that actually when there were services actually in the temple in Jerusalem, there were different doors to go in. There was the regular door for everyone who was coming into worship, and then there was a second door for mourners only. So if you walked through that door, the community knew that you were in mourning. And people would greet them as they came in with the following words: Hamakom yanachem etchem betoch she'ar avalei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May the divine comfort you, Hamakom, the place, may the divine comfort you, along with all the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. So there would be a break after Kabbalat Shabbat, before the formal start of the required prayers, to welcome in the mourners and to give them their own space so that they didn't have to be part of that extra celebratory service. They would be able to stand outside the synagogue or be outside of the walls so that they wouldn't have to take part of those joyous prayers. And then after that, we have the Psalms for Shabbat. Mizmor Tehillim, Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat, a psalm for the day of the Sabbath, for a day of Shabbat. And what's interesting about this is it doesn't mention Shabbat anywhere in the psalm right after the title, which says Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat. But nevertheless, Psalm 92 and the short psalm right afterwards, this is end of Psalm 92, the short psalm afterwards, Psalm 93, became the psalms of Shabbat. And whenever we have the liturgy that's not Shabbat, that asks us to include the prayer for Shabbat, these are the two psalms that are associated with Shabbat, Psalms 92 and 93. And then once this is over, you're going to see a mourner's Kaddish to kind of mark a separation between the two parts of the service. And then right after mourner's Kaddish, we go into Shabbat study texts, which are either done on your own, but this is the traditional text from Pirkei Avot, Bameh Madlikin. I believe this is from chapter 2, chapter 2 of Mishnah Shabbat. And then once that study is done, we enter into the formal Ma'ariv service, the formal evening service with Kaddish D'Rabbanan, another separation prayer. And then here's the formal start of our evening service, which is the call to worship, the Baruch Hu, the Shema and its blessings, getting us into eventually the Amidah, the central prayer of Friday night. So that's kind of an overview of our Kabbalat Shabbat service. Now, in addition to the traditional prayers, some other prayers and psalms and different passages have made their way into the Kabbalat Shabbat service to also help uplift our spirits for the beginning of the Sabbath. And one of them is our favorite song, Yedid Nefesh, beloved of my soul, compassionate Father, draw me, your servant, to your desire. Yedid Nefesh, another piyut, a poem written in the late 1500s. And then also we have the prayer Shalom Aleichem. I'm not sure if it's in this digital siddur here, but it's usually on page 5. I don't see access to page 5 here, but we have Shalom Aleichem on page 5. Another beautiful prayer that's really helped uplift our souls and also to kind of get us into the mood of being into the prayer space is called Ma Tovu. How lovely it is, how wonderful your tents are, Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. That's a quote obviously from the Torah, from the story of Balak and Bilam. And the Ma Tovu prayer is actually beautiful because it creates that space of saying that we are now entering into the holy space and kind of gets us ready for Kabbalat Shabbat. So what I wanted to do now is actually share some beautiful music that is associated with our Friday night services at Sinai Temple. What's interesting now is that times have really changed. Apparently, when I was a child, before I even had visited Sinai Temple in the 80s and 90s, and beginning in the 60s and even before then too, Friday night was the main service at Sinai Temple. You would have over 1,000 people there. The rabbi would give a full sermon. We would have the organ, the choir, the chazan would be there chanting all of the beautiful prayers. It would be a wonderful service. There would be a Shabbat dinner, Israeli dancing. It would be a full, complete Shabbat service experience, and that was the main attraction of Shabbat at the synagogue. Where I grew up at a Reformed synagogue too, that was the same thing, where Friday night was the main service of Shabbat where people attended. But now it's kind of switched over. Now I think in the past, maybe since the 90s, my God, already 25 years ago, 30 years ago, wow. The main service in the conservative movement and in Sinai Temple in particular has been Shabbat morning, where we will still get close to 1,000 people. But our Friday night service, it's mostly intimate. We have our B'nai Mitzvah family, we have some of our regulars come, but it's in Cone Chapel. We don't have a full rabbinic sermon. I don't lead any of the big prayers that we used to lead. I don't have my organist there or my choir unless it's a special occasion. And we get maybe about 50 to 70 people. So it's more of an intimate service. But recalling that memory of being in a beautifully packed synagogue and welcoming in the Shabbat, a prayer that we'd start with is Ma Tovu. And this setting of Ma Tovu is actually one of the most beautiful settings that I've ever heard. and it's by Cantor Meir Finkelstein. So I'm going to play you part of this now so that you can kind of get a sense of welcoming Shabbat. Here comes Matovu. God, I love that piece. That is one of my all-time favorite compositions of Jewish music by the incredibly talented Cantor, singer, composer, pianist, Cantor Meir Finkelstein, who is our Cantor, one of our wonderful Cantor emerita at Sinai Temple. He served Sinai Temple from 1982 through 2000. And while he was at Sinai Temple, he composed over 100 settings, probably over 150 settings of Jewish music, including Lador Lador, Zim Shalom, Ve'al Kulam, all the music that we know and love, written by Cantor Meir Finkelstein. And as you can see, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, I love Cantor Finkelstein's music, and I've recorded a ton of his music too. So I invite you to check that out. So that is Matovu, the opening prayer. We have time to play a few more. We're all at home. Where are we going to go? We got plenty of time. So as I mentioned before, right before Kabbalat Shabbat starts on page 11 with Psalm 95, we have the beautiful prayer Yedid Nefesh. And this is a beautiful setting of the Yedid Nefesh prayer, and it's by the Moshav band. So I wanted to share this with you. It's a setting by Persa, Israeli composer. Not much is known about this composer Persa. I've tried to do some research, but I love this melody. It really helps get me in the mood for Kabbalat Shabbat. Yedid Nefesh. What a way to start Kabbalat Shabbat. I hope you agree. Okay, we got a couple more to share. The wonderful prayer Shalom Aleichem, traditionally sung at our Shabbat table, traditionally 3 times for each verse. But this setting of Shalom Aleichem, written by Israel Goldfarb in the early part of the 20th century, I think it was right around the late teens or 1920s, maybe the 30s, not sure the exact date, but this became the traditional version of Shalom Aleichem. And it's sung all over the world. Once this was adopted here in America, it became so widely used, and now it's hard to imagine another Shalom Aleichem being known as the traditional version. Shalom Aleichem. And that is Shalom Aleichem. I don't know about you, but I'm already ready for Shabbat. So a couple more to share. Wanted to share with you the traditional melody of Lunaron, which I'm sure you are familiar with too. But this is just one of those traditional songs that has become part of our normal liturgy. And origins also unknown, but it's very folksy. So I'm sure it has its origins either here in Israel, or either here in the United States or in Israel, by one of the folk composers. So this doesn't strike me as a melody being multiple hundred years old, but it's one of those things too, just like Shalom Aleichem, or even like Debbie Friedman's Havdalah, which is only about 40 years old, has become so traditional. Here we go, Lunaron now. Yes, it's traditional. Yes, it's not anything fancy, but it also works. It works to get us in the mood. The next thing that I'd like to share with you is a setting of a psalm written by also a Sinai Temple native, Craig Taubman. Craig Taubman grew up at Sinai Temple, and he still joins us for services a few times a year. he helped to create the Friday Night Live service with Rabbi Wolpe, which created the Hashki Venu and all the other melodies that Craig Taubman is known for in the Jewish world. And one of those melodies is set to the end of Psalm 99. Let me pull that up for you. So a few more down over here. So right at the end of Psalm 99, we have the words, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, Vehishtachavu lehar kodsho, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Exalt Adonai our God and bow down at God's holy mountain, for Adonai our God is holy. Romemu by Craig Taubman. So on and so forth. Really beautifully focuses on just 2 lines of text, but repeats it over and over again and kind of creates that sense of real focus and intent on those words, on those tefillot, and really elevates us to the mood. Okay, one more to share with you. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and copy the links of all of these YouTube videos into the chat so that you can watch them in better quality on your own computers once we are done. I wanted to focus now on the Lacan Dodi prayer. As we mentioned before, this is the Kabbalistic song written in the 16th century. And this is a setting by Louis Lewandowski, who was a 19th century choir director and organist and really helped refine the beauty of Jewish music, helped set the prayers to Western harmony, implemented the use of a mixed choir, both men and women. So this was part of the Reform movement in Germany, but created some of the most beautiful Jewish music that we have. So this is Lacan Dodi, composed by Louis Lewandowski. I love the music of Lewandowski. Absolutely beautiful. Well, thank you all so much for joining me for this beautiful journey through Kabbalat Shabbat. I'm going to go ahead and share a few links with you. This is a link to my YouTube channel, which has over 100 videos of Jewish music. Many of the links that I will be linking are from my website. Here's a link to our Siddur, if you would like to go over the prayers. Here is a link to the Matovu by Cantor Mayor Finkelstein. Here's a link to Yedid Nefesh. And here's a link to Shalom Aleichem. Here's a link to Romamu. And here's the link to Lacan Dodi. Okay, so all of the links are there for you to enjoy, for you to continue watching on your own. And thank you all so much for joining. It's been a pleasure having you here virtually in my office. And I wish you all a very blessed healthy, and peaceful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining.